Hello everyone, this is the video for chapter 12. So if you would go to My Notes chapter 12 on Blackboard and go and pull it up if you haven't. The first slide will let you know what assignments are due this week. And go ahead and pull up my calendar while you all are pulling up yours. Let's see here. Yeah, so this would be the week after your observation report has probably been turned in if you are in the full semester class. So a little bit of a break this week after last week. So let's go ahead and get in. You should be with me now at this point. Chapter objectives. Again, this chapter is low incidence disabilities, multiple disabilities, deaf blindness, and TBI or traumatic brain injury. So some of the chapter definitions define multiple disabilities, deaf blindness, and traumatic brain injury or TBI. You'll be able to describe the characteristics of individuals with multiple disabilities, deaf blindness, and TBI. You'll be able to state why it's difficult to identify the exact number of students with severe disabilities, and you'll be able to list some of the biological causes of severe disabilities. You'll be explain why a curriculum based on typical developmental stages and milestones is inappropriate for students with severe and multiple disabilities, and list advantages and disadvantages of the regular classroom placement for students with severe disabilities. And finally, identify the skills and dispositions of a teacher that a teacher needs to work with individuals with severe disabilities. So let's go ahead and look at some definitions here. First definition is the multiple disabilities, and it's concomitant impairments, the combination of which causes such severe educational needs they cannot be accommodated in special education programs solely for one of the impairments. Severe disabilities refers to significant impairments in intellectual, motor, and or social functioning, and IQ scores of 35 to 40 or 40 to 55, which is significantly below the norm. Their profound disabilities require continuous monitoring and functions at a level no higher than that of a typical developing 2-year-old in cognition, communication, social skills, mobility, and activities of daily living, and IQ scores of 20 to 25 and below. So you're looking at severe disabilities at IQ scores of 35 to 40 or 40 to 55, and then profound disabilities, which are 20 to 25 and below. Then there's definitions of deaf blindness and concomitant hearing and visual impairments, the combination of which causes severe communication and other developmental and educational needs that they cannot be accommodated in special ed programs solely based on for children with deafness or children with blindness. The majority of children with deaf blindness have some functional hearing, vision, or both. So the majority of them do have some functional hearing or vision, or both. Then I've got some additional items that I've added. Characteristics of dual sensory impairment. There's appearance of non-compliance, socially inappropriate interactions, and often passive and or non-responsive. Now I've got the first question for you. So get a piece of paper out and let's look at this question, and then I'd like for you to pause the video and go ahead and answer your question and then come back to it. Why is curriculum based on typical developmental stages and milestones inappropriate for students with severe and multiple disabilities? So think about it. Hopefully you've already read the chapter. If not, give it your best guess, and then we'll go over the answer here in a couple minutes. Okay, glad to have you back. Developmental theories of learning assume that children pass through an orderly sequence of developmental stages. These stages are the basis for determining what kinds of skills are appropriate for instruction and when those skills should be taught. For example, if a child has not yet developed the physical dexterity necessary to properly hold a pencil, teaching the child to write will usually not begin until the child is developmentally ready. A curriculum based on typical developmental stages, however, is unlikely to meet the needs of students with severe disabilities. For children with severe disabilities, learning such basic skills as getting from place to place independently, communicating, controlling bowel and bladder functions, and self-feeding cannot wait for readiness stage to be reached. Instruction of these skills, all of which influence the individual's quality of life, must begin when individuals with severe disabilities need to learn them, not when they're developmentally ready to learn them. So come back to this slide off and on. You really do need to get an understanding of this to help you understand the curriculum and what you're going to be working with. Definitions of TBI, or traumatic brain injury, and I'll start just using TBI. An acquired injury to the brain caused by an external force resulting in total or partial functional disability or psychosocial impairment, or both, that adversely affects the child's educational performance. Applies to open or closed head injuries. Closed head injuries are the most common type. The effects of TBI on learning and behavior are determined by severity of the injury and the part of the brain that sustained damage. More on traumatic brain injury. A mild brain injury results in a concussion, which is a brief loss of consciousness without any subsequent complications or damage. Contusions usually accompany a moderate brain injury, which lasts from 30 minutes to 24 hours, followed by days or weeks of confusion. A hematoma. Coma, in which a person cannot be awakened and makes no meaningful response to external stimulation, results from severe head trauma or anoxia. Characteristics of multiple and severe. Most students with severe disabilities exhibit significant deficits in intellectual functioning, have more than one disability. Most students with profound disabilities are non-ambulatory, unresponsive to sensory stimuli, and need round-the-clock support and care. The one defining characteristics of students with the most significant disabilities is they exhibit significant and obvious deficits in multiple life skill or developmental areas. These students require extensive, repeated, individualized instruction and support. Some more characteristics: there's slow acquisition of new skills, so there's going to be a lot of repetition, a lot of breaking down components into smaller steps. Poor generalization and maintenance of new skills. There's also limited communication skills and impaired motor development. Next is another question, so pull out your paper again. Let's see how you do on this one. How can a teacher increase the learning potential of students who exhibit significant and obvious deficits in multiple life skill or developmental areas? So go ahead and pause the video and come back and see how you do. Okay, the answer. Often students with severe disabilities need instruction in many basic skills that most children acquire without intensive instruction. However, it is well documented that these students can learn, do learn, and with appropriate teaching and support lead productive lives. Effective instruction for this population of learners must be carefully planned, systematically executed, and continually monitored for effectiveness. Specifically, teachers must use precise assessment to plan instruction, develop clearly defined and appropriate sequenced objectives, use clear prompts, provide immediate feedback and reinforcement, and use strategies to promote generalization. So again, kind of remember that as you're going through. Characteristics of multiple and severe: deficits in self-help skills, infrequent social interaction and constructive behavior, stereotypic behavior, and challenging behavior. Then you have characteristics of deaf blindness. Many students who are deaf and blind exhibit some of the characteristics as those with multiple and severe disabilities. More than 90% have one or more additional disabilities. 49% have physical disabilities. 76% have cognitive impairments, and cognitive abilities range from giftedness to profound intellectual disabilities, where 59% have complex healthcare needs. Many engage in self-stimulatory behavior. Then we have characteristics of TBI. Number one, it's complex. Symptoms vary by severity of the injury, extent of the site of injury, age of the child at time of injury, and the time passed. since the injury. There are three categories of impairments. There's physical and sensory changes, there's cognitive impairments, there's social, behavioral, and emotional problems. Now let's talk about the prevalence of some of these low incidence disabilities. There's multiple disabilities. There's no accurate and uniform figures on prevalence exist in that category. Deaf blindness, only about 1,000 received special education in 2012-2013 school year. And TBI, the leading cause of death in children, is also the most common acquired disability in childhood. In 2012-2013, there were 26,000 received special education in that area. Some of the causes: multiple and severe disabilities. In most cases, a brain disorder is involved. Some are born with chromosomal abnormalities, may also develop later in life from head trauma, from accidents, assaults, falls, or abuse. TBI is a common cause of closed head injuries are accidents, falls, and sports accidents. There's also deaf blindness. There's congenital or acquired causes. Chard syndrome and Usher syndrome are also part of that area. Some of the educational approaches you will be looking at as you educate kids in this category. Under curriculum, you're going to have functionality and age appropriateness. I want you to look in this category in text and gain a little more understanding of what they're talking about when they talk about functionality and age appropriateness. There's curriculum areas that they talk about. There's self-care, which we've discussed a little bit early on, communication, literacy, recreation, and leisure are explicitly taught, and you'll see that on a quiz. Making choices and access to the general ed curriculum. And many of these, you'll see, were also areas that we taught in some of the other areas that we've discussed this semester. So not too much difference in some, but definitely difference in teaching and how you want to instruct. I have another question for you, so please pull out your paper again and answer this question. How can a teacher assist a child returning to school after a traumatic brain injury, will fatigue easily, and have a short attention span? So think about that, and then we'll talk about it and answer the question. Teachers can assist these students by providing a shortened school day and concentrating academic instruction during peak performance periods. Additionally, the child should be provided with frequent breaks and a reduced workload. Teachers should provide clear, uncomplicated instructions, break multi-step instructions into simplified steps, and pair auditory with visual cues. Other modifications should be made based on the needs of a child. For example, a child who has problems with memory and organization might need a special resource time at the beginning of the day where a teacher helps him plan the day's schedule and keep track of assignments. Selecting and prioritizing instructional targets. Two strategies for combining functional and academic content are embedding core academic content into functional activities and adding functional applications to instructional objectives based on core content standards. And then a functional approach is a priority in curriculum. How should the students be taught? You should select and prioritize instructional targets that are meaningful for students and their families. Instruction must be carefully planned, systematically executed, continuously monitored for effectiveness. You may have to change how you're instructing. You may find out that something that has worked is now not working, but you'll only know that if you continually monitor. The following are components of an instructional program. The student's current level of performance must be assessed. The skill must be defined clearly and actively engage the student. Some other instructional methods. The skill may be needed to broken down into smaller component steps. The teacher must determine how the student can clearly actively participate, provide clear prompts, and gradually withdraw the prompts. The student must receive immediate feedback. The teacher must use strategies that promote generalization and maintenance. And finally, the student's performance must be directly and frequently assessed. Partial participation. There's also positive behavioral support. There's functional assessments that may need to be used to find out some things that you might be able to be assisted by. Scientific evidence supports that effectiveness of functional assessment for that positive behavior support. Small group instruction. For students with deaf blindness, tactile teaching techniques. For students with TBI, curricular and instructional approaches for students with severe and multiple disabilities are appropriate. I want to mention again that choices for making increases quality of life for individuals with severe disabilities. So make sure that you give your student choices during the day on what they want to do and when. I do have another question coming up. Why is it so critical to select functional and age-appropriate curriculum objectives for students with severe and multiple disabilities? So go ahead and pause the video and go ahead and look at that to see what you think the answer should be. Okay, first of all, educational programs for students with severe disabilities are future-oriented in their efforts to teach skills that will enable students to participate in integrated settings as meaningfully and independently as possible after they leave school. Functional and age-appropriate behaviors are more likely to be reinforced in the natural environments and, as a result, maintained in the student's repertoire. Placement options. 13% of students with multiple disabilities receive instruction in the regular classroom, 16% receive instruction in a resource room, and 46% receive instruction in special schools or other settings. In Missouri, we have state schools. In Warrensburg that I used to teach, we used to utilize the Higginsville Center, and there's also one in Sedalia at the time that I'm doing this video. 21% of students who are deaf-blind receive instruction, let's go down here. Deaf-blind instruction in regular classrooms, 12% in resource rooms, 34% in separate classes, and 33% in special schools and other settings. Whereas 49% of students with TBI receive instructions in the regular classroom, 22% resource rooms, 20% in separate classrooms, and only 9% in special schools or other settings. Placement options, the benefits of a neighborhood school and inclusion. Peers without disabilities are more likely to function responsibly as adults in a pluralistic society. Integrated schools are more meaningful instruction environments. Parents and families have greater access to school activities when children are attending their home schools, and it helps develop range of relationships with peers without disabilities. And it benefits of inclusion on social skills and relationships have the most extensive imperial support. Here's another question. This one here, I've got lots of questions in this one. So go ahead and answer this one. How much time should a student with severe and multiple disabilities spend in the general education classroom? Well, although the social benefits of regular class participation for students with disabilities have been clearly shown, the effects of full inclusion on the attainment of IEP goals and objectives is not yet known. A major challenge for both special and general educators is to develop models and strategies for including students with severe disabilities in regular classroom activities without sacrificing their opportunities to acquire, practice, and generalize the functional skills they need most. How much time should be spent in regular classes? Well, enough to ensure the student is a member and not a visitor. A lot if the student is engaged in meaningful activities. Quite a bit if she is young or he is young, but less as she approaches or he approaches 21. And that's taken out of page 46 in Brown et al. 1991. And here's a little bit more on that. Major challenge for both special and general educators on how much time in the regular classroom. You should develop strategies for including students with severe disabilities in the general ed classroom without sacrificing their opportunities to acquire, practice, and generalize the functional skills they need most. Allow them to attend the same schools and classrooms they would attend if they did not have a disability. And the challenge and rewards of teaching. Teaching students with severe disabilities is difficult and demanding. It requires teachers to be well organized, firm, and consistent, Be knowledgeable about one-to-one and small group instructional formats. Be able to work cooperatively with other teachers and related service professionals, and maintain an accurate records for constant planning for future needs of students. Sorry, corrected a few spaces in these. And then one of the last questions, what are the most important skills for a teacher for students with severe and multiple disabilities, and why? Many of you might remember the last slide. It has a lot of information. But here we go. Teaching students with severe disabilities is difficult and demanding. The teacher must be well organized, firm, and consistent. Must be able to manage a complex educational operation, which usually involves supervising professional aides, student teachers, peer tutors, and volunteers. The teacher must be knowledgeable about instructional formats and must be able to work cooperatively with other professionals. Most important, teachers must be sensitive to small changes in behavior and be persistent in evaluating and changing instruction to improve learning and behavior. I would definitely suggest in this section that you monitor and assess regularly, because again, you may not recognize those small steps that your students are making one way or the other, and it will help you in preparing and continuing your teaching strategies. The challenge and rewards of teaching continued here. Be sensitive. Let's see here. This looks like a little bit of the same, but a little different. Be consistent and persistent in evaluating. Do not be too quick to remove difficult tasks or requests that result in noncompliance or misbehavior. And teaching students who require instruction at its very best can be highly rewarding teaching experience. Lastly, I know this is mostly online reading this, but I did want to go and leave this in here. A group discussion that I typically do in a face-to-face class would maybe help you gain a little bit more information here. So I'll put that on here and leave that here. Go back here real quick. That is the end of the PowerPoint. You do have Chapter 12 quiz. Here in the next few days, you'll probably be receiving an email about evaluation for the course. Please make sure and do that. There is no way of me knowing who filled them out, and I don't actually get access to them until after grades have been submitted. I do utilize this, and with this being the first class in a little while that I did totally online during the fall semester, if you could give me any ideas, that would be great. It's a little bit more time than in the summer, so I wanted to kind of see how you felt it was broken up and see, if there were some things I might be able to help with maybe some of the heavy weeks. Get the quiz done. Make sure you do your initial post by Wednesday. And then remember your DI resource collections due the week before finals are over. As far as the discussion, let me jump down to that. So yeah, your discussion board there. So go ahead, after you read the chapter and viewed and the supplemental materials, please respond to this post. It's a two-part assignment. So see both sides of an issue to this group of students. So go ahead and read the ideas there and look at PowerPoint slides. Let me make sure 20 through 22. Since I've kind of done some changes here, make sure that they're the same ideas there. Yeah. So go ahead and look at that, and we'll go from there. I'll talk to you later.